for disaster recovery because that's what Jason's going to be presenting on. So if you want to take 2 minutes while Jason gets set up and answer the poll, and we'll throw that up. I guess I should have kept my screen up on the presenter so that we could see those results when we're done here. Sorry, Jason, I'll take it back in a second.
And Tracy will also have an open Q&A after the Stump the Chump, which the Stump the Chump is also a Q&A session. So if you'd like, we have a Q&A session pretty much from 2 to 4 o'clock this afternoon.
All right, we'll give it just a few more, maybe about 20 more seconds so that we don't eat up into Jason's time too much here.
That's okay.
And Andres has a question to you, Fred.
What do I mean by practice? Just save a snapshot or go through restores and verify too. Not sure what you're talking about there.
I think that's for Jason.
Andrew.
Oh, okay.
I'm like,
disaster recovery.
Oh, for the poll. Okay.
The poll.
Gotcha. It's kind of like medical, you know, it's a practice. All right, let's go ahead and close this up here. And hopefully it's showing for everybody. So we've got a few people that are wondering, Jason, what is disaster recovery? So that might be a good place to start.
Disaster recovery covers a large field of everything. And I'd like to, I can't share my screen just yet, but basically when we were kind of come up with this idea internally, we had this pandemic on our mind and we were kind of like, what are other companies going through, and what, you know, is there something broader than just disaster recovery? Because many of you know me, some of you, this is the first time you've ever met me. I've been doing a lot of IT in the last 25 years. Hard to believe that I have an 18-year-old in about 2 weeks. And throughout the time, it's basically, you know, IT driven. My server fails, my hardware gives out, or you know, I get a security breach and it takes 1 or 2 users down, could affect your entire company. But as we started thinking about this COVID-19 and everybody's working from home and there's staggered shifts, and it kind of gave us a little more opportunity to think outside the box and do more like, well, what do companies do? What do other businesses do when you know, their shifts are cut in half because they want to minimize the distances that people are next to each other? And so we kind of thought internally and we came up with kind of a business continuity practice or plan that we have here. And I'm going to share my screen out. Let's see here. Give me just a minute. There we go. So this is the business continuity is more than just disaster recovery. Business continuity is how can my business survive in these times, or when. A little bit about Encompass Solutions. We're based in the Greensboro, North Carolina area. Some quick facts about it. We also have we've been an Epical partner for a number of years. We do a lot of other skills, so we have a wide depth and breadth of skills here. We have functional consulting, we have technical consulting, EDI services, infrastructure support, and we even do some managed services. Here's just a kind of a snapshot of some of our customers throughout the years. So we'll dive into why I'm here. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, when Calvin and Fred approached us about coming up with a subject for the user group meeting, something that was on everyone's mind is we're all working from home, or we're all working remotely, or we're all working from somewhere, and it's been a lot of disruption. And one of the things that we asked ourselves was, are we prepared? And I would ask anyone out there, are you prepared? Have you already been affected maybe? And if you have, do you know where you're vulnerable? Do you know where your gaps are? Do you know where you need to prepare the next time something like this happens? What exactly is a black swan event? Black swans are just something that's unusual that happens once or twice or occasionally throughout the history of time. And it's something that you just need to prepare for. And there's no rhyme or reason. There's no way it happens. There's no predictability behind it. It just kind of happens. So the most common kind of things that we look at are infrastructure, security, equipment failure. Those are more what I would consider disaster recovery items, right? Your infrastructure fails, you have power go down, you might have a network outage, you might have someone get crypto aware, you might have an internet go out. Those are kind of temporary things that might affect your business for a short, couple of hours, right? But then the next thing you look at are something like natural disasters. Living in North Carolina, I've been here 3.5 years, and I've gone through 3 hurricanes and a couple of other storms that have knocked power out for several days. I know you guys up there in Chicago and Iowa and the Midwest get tornadoes and high winds that knock out power trees. Our friends out in the West, they get fire and people in the southern states get flooding and all that stuff. So natural disasters are more what I would consider business continuity plans, or things that you need to plan on doing your buildings or your physical environment. And then we all have seen the pandemic that has come out, and this is kind of a new thing that a lot of people may not have thought about. Some may have, but what do you do if your company comes under attack with a pandemic like COVID-19? Your employees, several of your employees might come down with this. What do you do as a company to make sure that you're safe and you're protecting your employees? Obviously, that's number one. But how do you supplement what they were doing in your workforce? And we'll touch a little bit on that later on in the presentation. I'll give you some examples of how we were able to help a couple of our customers in a time of their need. So at Encompass, we came up with kind of a 5-step plan, and we like to call it the PROVE plan, so PROVE, and each one of those I will go into a little bit more detail, but they are basically, you're going to plan for each scenario, reprioritize, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as well, but I think what a lot of people do is they tend to put business continuity and disaster recovery kind of on a back burner, or hey, we'll get to it when we get to it, or hey, we've not had a disaster in 15 years. I don't think we need that. And I would argue that you should always have that. And you'll see a couple of examples of that. You want to organize your resources. It's never a bad thing to make sure that your resources, whether they're physical machines, their equipment, or personnel, that you have them, you have a plan, everybody knows where they're going. You want to validate that plan. I'll give you some examples of ways that you can actually go through that plan and validate it before you are need to and come up short somewhere. And then the last one is just execute. Be ready, be prepared, and make sure that everyone knows their job, knows their role in the event of some sort of disaster, whether that is a hurricane, tornado, a pandemic, or something else. So the first one is plan for scenarios, or RP, and these are more geared towards like natural disaster. Fail over to another geolocation. I think I heard Christine mention that you guys use AWS. That's great, and we also so AWS, Azure, any of your online hosting solutions, they usually have some sort of geolocation that you can back up to or restore to. You need to make sure that you have something in your back pocket in case the need arises. Also, if you don't feel comfortable with things like cloud-based technology like Azure or AWS, for example, make sure you have something there at your location, whether it's down the block, around the corner, a local provider that might be able to do that. Also look at redundant power sources. So if you have the option of multiple providers in your area, have a second circuit brought in so that, you know, if you have somebody, you know, hit a power line with a backhoe, you can actually go over to your other power source if you need to. Maybe that is a diesel generator. And one thing that a lot of people kind of take for granted is our internet connection. And I know there's a lot of movement to SaaS-related applications, and not just Epicor, but there's other out there. And if somebody severs your internet connection, what do? Well, they do make solutions out there for cellular-based technology that runs alongside of your routers and switches so that you can kind of fail over to that. And while it's not as fast, it will get you up and running. So if you are running if you're running Epicor in the cloud or some other cloud-based technology or application, you'll be able to make by with that. Also, one thing that a lot of customers that I find they don't have are a paper-based workflow. So if you have some sort of outage on the internet, or you can't get to your Epicor servers, or ransomware hits the place, but you still need to get your orders out, make sure you have some type of manual process in place to capture that critical data, so that whenever you do recover and get things back up online, that you can have someone enter that data. Along the infrastructure side, hardware failures, I would always make sure that you have your servers set up in some sort of redundant fashion, whether that's virtualization or physical servers. Make sure you have those backed up, and make sure you have those on corresponding hardware. Security breaches. This is an interesting one because I put ransomware in here. One of the things that I'm seeing a trend in is not so many viruses too much anymore, or malware, but these ransomware things, that these kind of phishing scams where somebody will send you an email, it looks real. One of the things that we've done here at Encompass is we've actually kind of put an external sender on there, because what a lot of times we find is that somebody has the same name, or the same name as an internal employee, but their email address, they're using some fake Yahoo or Gmail. And so we were finding that a couple people were accidentally clicking on something thinking it was real. Fortunately, we haven't had any major things go through, but it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, wow, that was really well crafted. And it happens to people all the time. So I want to bring that to your awareness of that. Obsolete programs, I threw this in here because they can be a little bit problematic if you have a hardware failure. I remember several places, several years ago, I was at a place and they had a Windows XP machine or a Windows 98 machine running some very important equipment. Make sure you have, if the machine won't run on anything other than that, make sure you at least have another machine that you can plug in there, so that your machine won't go down, especially if it's a critical piece of your infrastructure. The machine equipment OS, basically if you have CNC machines or mills or anything that requires a type of operating system, make sure that is up to date. Make sure that you have a backup for that. Make sure that your hardware vendor has given you enough, training to be able to operate that if you need to. A couple of things that are more business related, supply chain. A lot of times with what we saw with this COVID when it first hit, was there was very little things shipping. People weren't shipping places. They were hard to get items. For example, sanitizers and paper towel and toilet paper. I mean, those things are maybe from a consumer standpoint, but from a business standpoint, what things in your business would be severely impacted if you couldn't get them in. Things like tariffs, those change all the time. Economic policy changes, it's probably going to weigh heavily on your business, maybe not. Trade wars, and one thing that we like to say is it's a good idea to always diversify your suppliers and vendors. If you have a supplier, let's say you need steel, and one of your suppliers is down for some reason, do you have a secondary supply chain that you can go to? And then we have just the kind of the black swan events, the pandemic. Everybody has been witnessing that. The economic volatility, sometimes this can put your financial means, can kind of strain that. And then you have the one-off disasters like 9/11. Nobody was ready for that. So the next section is the reprioritize your business continuity, and the R. And we'd like to make this at least twice a year or biannually. And very important that every department is involved in this process. Things that you may have thought about, but probably don't really realize it until it happens is if I'm shipping and I need 1,000 labels and I lose my entire server and everything that's on it, how am I going to ship that product? Do I have a backup way to create labels or shipping labels? So every department should be involved. And we like to think that maybe working with an outside organization or kind of a third party solution provider would provide an unbiased type of audit, if you will. One of the other things that we like to do is kind of adopt this internally. So every project that you do, whether it's a physical equipment upgrade or some type of process improvement, you should always be thinking, how can I incorporate the business continuity plan into this project? And I made a note here that even though ISO 9001 does have some requirements around disaster recovery, backing up data, they do not specifically require any type of business continuity plans. So we always think that you should take a risk-based approach, meaning always going to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And then are your vendors or your suppliers, do they do any type of business continuity? Are you asking them? What do you do if your business comes under attack from a ransomware, or you lose personnel from a pandemic or a COVID-19 scenario? The next section is organize resources. And personnel redundancy. Everyone, I believe, should be doing this anyway. If you have a large manufacturing plant or even a small manufacturing plant, normally the best practice is to kind of cross-train personnel on different equipment. But if you're not doing that, you should highly consider doing that. This next one is interesting. Is processes are well documented. Make sure that any process that you have is well documented. And I even would take it a step further. Make sure you have them printed out in some type of manual format. So in case you do have the server crash or you have an extended power outage, that you can actually access those documents so you know what people are doing. The machines might be up and running, but if you have questions on what that is or what they should be doing, it's all readily available for them. Equipment redundancy. I like to make sure that I talk through this with customers. Make sure that you have, if you can't have physical big machines somewhere else, that you at least have equipment or pieces and parts or repair parts close by. One of the other things that we were kind of thinking through this is, what about HR? What about payroll? I mean, if I have an important executive that comes down with a virus or something that they can't control, can someone else call in payroll? Can we make sure that our employees are going to be paid? And maybe you have that all automated and through ADP or whatever your payroll option is, but I know a lot of places it's still, kind of a one-person show. One or two people make that call, and just make sure that you have that documented and make sure that is it's taken care of. And again, partner with a remote workforce staffing organization. A company like Encompass can help you guys, can help a small company or even a large company kind of augment your staffing resources. And I'll give you an example a little bit later on. We talk a little bit more about it. The next one is validate this plan. So you've come up with all these plans, you've come up with the resources, you've organized them. Well, how do I validate it? Validating is a very critical step in Epicor. I know when we do Epicor implementations, we have our customers do a validation. I'm sure Calvin and Fred, you guys have your customers do validation. Make sure that there's no gaps or there's problems along the way. Well, you should do the same thing when you're doing a business continuity plan and when you're coming up with that. That just means you're walking through these steps manually, that you're eliminating any type of gaps that might arise. Something that I think I heard when I came back on was, do we restore backups? Or one of the questions was, how often do you do your disaster recovery? And what's interesting here, and I can tell you from years of experience, that even though you might be backing up something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be valid. So I worked with a number of customers through the years that they were diligently backing up their SQL database for months, and we needed to restore it, and it was corrupt. Couldn't work, didn't work. And my first question is, well, when was the last time you tested it? And nobody could tell me. So make sure that you're not only backing those up, obviously backing up is a very critical piece of that, but restoring it should be done at least once a month, if not more often. One of the other things on here is restore backups, off-site backups. Even though you may have them locally and you've tested them successfully, if you get wiped out or you can't get access to that, you need to make sure that your off-site backups are valid, they are working, and you can actually work with them. One of the other employees here that helped me kind of put this together, he suggested, and one thing that we try to do here internally is use employees' vacation time as a way to validate these processes. So as employees go off on vacation, does the person behind them or next to them that's responsible for the job, do they have what they need to get it done? Are they effective in doing their job there? A couple other things that have come up in the last few months as we've kind of been working remotely. Make sure people have laptops or some type of device, whether that's your business providing it or they have a personal laptop. Just make sure they have a way to do work from home if they need to. Keep replacement parts for your big machines on site, CNC, LaserJet. These are things that if you go down and there's no shipping or somebody's not shipping or they're out of stock on something, these are things that you'll uncover while you're validating that plan. And remote access, I threw this on here because when the COVID-19 started hitting, we had a lot of people call us or reach out to us about getting remote access installed or VPNs installed, and it became aware to me that a lot of customers were not prepared for that. They didn't have, while they may have had some things here, they didn't actually have remote access or VPN set up on their laptops at home. And just pardon me just a second, I'm gonna go turn the lights back on. So the last one we're going to talk about is execute, and these are things that you can do internally as an executive team or as a management team. You want to prepare some checklists, whether they're physical checklists where you're checking them off or they're online, some type of web-based application. One of the big things is commit the time and the resources. Nothing's more important than a good talk where you're not doing anything. I would argue that committing the time and making this a daily or even monthly routine with your employees and your team leads is going to be better off in the long run. If you're at a management or executive level, you just need to make sure that you are walking the walk. If you are someone in the IT field or an IT director, make sure you have your executive team buy-in. Make sure they're on board with this, and they give you some top-down support. And as I mentioned here, a small investment now can be worth thousands later on. Make sure you incorporate this method in the front of your mind. It goes without saying that disasters and pandemics, I mean, they're not going to go away. There's always going to be something that comes around, and whether you're prepared for them will probably make the difference between whether you survive or fail. So a little bit about this remote workforce augmentation. One of the things that we did back in April is we had a customer. Obviously, the COVID-19 hit. Everybody's working from home. Even our customers were kind of they were kind of staggering shifts. Not every customer. Most customers were considered essential, so they had people on site and staffed there accordingly. But occasionally we'd run into a customer that was running a very small shift out in the plant. And one of the items that came up in April was, hey, do you have anyone in your organization that can help us do advanced ship notifications? They were brand new to Epicor. They were moving over. They hadn't quite gone live yet on the EDI side, and they needed a group of people to do advanced ship notifications to their suppliers or to their customers. And they had over 150 trading partners, and we stepped up to the plate, and we had a team of people internally that basically did manual data entry for about 4 to 6 weeks, off and on. And the next one of their sister companies came to us and said, hey, you did such a nice job with this process. Do you think you could help us do accounts receivable data entry or AR invoice data entry? And we said, sure, no problem. And so we walked through the process, and we manually enter their AR invoices both in the Epicor and out in the EDI web portal. So things like that, partnering with a company, and again, I'm a little biased because I'm with Encompass, but partnering with a company that can do that can step in, that knows your processes, it really means a lot to your bottom line. So I think that's all I had. So I'll open it up to questions, comments, turn it back over. Here's my contact information if you guys need to get a hold of us or any of that.
One thing I take into on your backups, and I'm a big advocate of this, just like you said, you've got to test them to restore them, but also make sure you know the process to restore them, because you're going to be under high stress when you do that. So if you've got that process written down where it's easy to access and you don't have to think, it's going to make it go smoother. And also know how long that process takes, and that your management knows that, so that when you're having to do that, they can be the barrier so that you're not getting hit with a whole bunch of people going, when will this be up? And they can take that hit and go, it's going to be half an hour, it's going to be 2 hours, whatever it is, but they can take that hit and let you focus, and that's going to help you do a lot better management of that.
No, that's an excellent point, Fred. Excellent point.
Fred, just because a tornado's coming doesn't mean it's high pressure. Get back to work.
One thing I agree with Jason is the fire drill. Not enough companies do the fire drill. We had in the past backups going VMware snapshots, and then you go to the vendor, you need a backup. He says, well, we were only backing up the C drive. You didn't tell us to back up D&E where your SQL data is. It's like, oh. And people assume the backups are available right away. No, they say it'll take us 48 hours. It's not disaster hit, I get them tomorrow. You kind of need to figure out that timing with your vendor, and so. And I just don't know, how do you do a fire drill? Do you just on purpose corrupt production and say, let's put this to the test? Don't know.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I forgot to mention this, but internally what we're doing is, and we use Microsoft Azure for pretty much all of our stuff. And we are, next week, as a matter of fact, we are scheduled to do a a failover. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring all of our Azure VMs up in a separate location, and we're going to have our team go through and validate to make sure it's all working. It's a very simple process. We're working with an outside vendor to make sure that it's done correctly, it's audited properly, and we don't have any gaps in our processes. So it's just something that we do, something that even if you don't have an Azure subscription or anything like that, you can still do this internally on different hardware. It's a little bit more difficult. I will tell you that, and I haven't really used AWS much, but I will tell you that Azure tools make it very simple to restore. Even if you lost a machine and you just needed to restore from last night, it would just overwrite the machine that's there. And it's a very simple, maybe 20, 30-minute process. You can also relocate it to another geolocation so that if you wanted to test your failover in a different location, you could do that.
I've also run into some folks when I've gone in that they're using a software to back up a machine. And this again ties in with your argument of make sure you do the restore. That software backed up the machine, but it wasn't SQL aware, and so it wasn't backing up the databases. It was backing up the files, which isn't the same in SQL. And so they would have found that out when they went to restore, but that's going to be a little bit too late.
Yeah, one thing that I've seen in the past is that if you're using like a software package to back up SQL, sometimes those agents, they have a way of I guess, expiring the backup files. And so typically what I've seen as best practice would be let SQL manage the SQL backups and transaction log backups and store that physical file, use your backup software to take that physical file and store it somewhere, but let SQL manage the actual backup files themselves and that plan, because otherwise I've seen where you can try to restore it, but SQL doesn't know, and so now you've got this agent that's trying to restore, and it says, can't do it because it doesn't match. So I don't know if anyone else has run into that, but I've run into that several times.
That's what I advocate too. Let SQL do the backups and then back up that file using your other software.
Yep, and same thing, Fred. We've also seen a couple customers, if you lose your AD, Active Directory, you will lose all of Epicor with it, since it all feeds off of the Active Directory security. You can't restore a VM if the Active Directory is missing.
Right.
Anybody have questions or feedback from Jason? Haven't seen anything show up in the window yet, but I could be wrong. Simon says, just make sure you're monitoring your SQL backups, either with alerts or a good DBA that keep you in the cupboard. Yes, if you're not.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I've actually gone out and I try to beat into people that you should always get an email regardless whether the backup succeeds or fails. You can always set up a rule if it succeeds to go into a folder, and you can check that once a day. But if you don't get that email one way or the other, how do you know it actually succeeded? So you either have to go in manually and look at it, or go look at that folder and see what's there. And that could be very detrimental, because I've seen enough people go, well, we thought it was working. And again, when you go to restore, it's too late to do that.
Yep, and again, to your point, Fred, make sure you're documenting where you go look for that, so that if someone's on vacation, somebody else knows how to go look for that.
And Mark says, I don't know if Jason said it, make sure you print out backup instructions and critical info so you can get to it when your network's down. If you can't get to your network, you can't get to the documentation.
And I think I did put that in there.
He's like, yeah, got to do something so you can get to it when you are down.
That's right. Manual processes, even though it's kind of everybody wants to go electronic today, it's always a wise thing to do. Even your Epicor practices, make sure they're documented. Make sure that anything that you do, that you would have machine instructions and procedures that you might have attached with the Epicor part record you have a manual copy of those somewhere in a file cabinet or at the shop floor manager's office or something like that, because it can make a difference.
Any other questions or things that folks have run into where they've had to do business continuity? Not like there wasn't a pandemic that we all ran into and had to do this, but
Exactly.
just making sure I didn't miss any questions. Mark would like to share a quick story. You okay with that, Jason?
Sure. Who
All
is
right.
it?
Let's see.
Now,
There you are, Mark.
just a quick one. We had while I was on vacation, of course, it happened. Phone system went down. Did some digging into it from a campground in Idaho with a wireless internet connection and laptops. That was a lot of fun. But we found that a pair of our drives failed on our server. The only thing that was on that pair of drives happened to be the phone system, and so we actually were very fortunate in that regard, in that our first time full-on Veeam restore did work properly, and we restored it to a different, or I restored it to a different drive set and was able to get up and running. Once we figured out that was the problem and stopped looking at other things, we had it fixed up and running in a half hour. So it turned out to be I think that's our first real backup test that we did. Test restore, make that a live restore, but it actually did work. So Veeam and our system actually came through for us, even though it wasn't as fully tested as it should have been. But so it will happen when you least expect it and least need it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was in Idaho. Fortunately, I had internet where I was at. Otherwise, we would have, our phones as it was were down for 6 hours that day. Once we figured out the problem, it was a half hour to get it going. So good luck to everybody on this.
Was that good luck sarcasm or?
A little bit of both. I don't know. Saturdays from home seem like a good a time to test this stuff, not Fridays on vacation from Idaho. My 2 cents worth. Somebody did ask when to test. That's what going forward, that's what Saturdays are going to be for.
Yep. So Mark, let me ask you a question. Did you have manual processes in place while you were troubleshooting the phone system?
No, we had no firm documentation to go on. So I got a text that said our phones aren't working. Of course, I didn't get complete information from our staff, and that what they didn't tell me was that you could make outgoing calls, but we couldn't get incoming calls. I assumed it was our ISP. I sent our MSP after the ISP. A few hours, several hours later, they said, well, it's not the ISP. And then our phone, the company who did our voice over IP phone system said, well, your server's not responding to the request. I remoted into VMware, saw that server was down, that there was an orange light blinking on the VMware console that said, there's a hardware failure. Dig in quickly, it's hard drives, and that's the only server on those particular pair of hard drives. And so that's how we did the troubleshooting, but it was not that troubleshooting is not well documented. On a sidebar, I view voice over IP as a house of cards with so many moving pieces. I can't even believe I ever get a phone call to work. But we've had more voice over IP failures in the last 3 years than we had with hard POTS lines in the last 17 years in our previous location. But that's the nature of the beast we're at today. So, but we did get it up and running via that mechanism. By the way, the other thing you might want to check for those out there that is related to this, we pay an MSP a lot of money. They just got themselves fired because they claimed they were monitoring all of our systems, all of our hardware. Those hard drives failed at 11 p.m. the night before. Their hardware, their great detection software never found it, never warned them, because had we had a warning the night before that we had hard drives failing, we would have started looking there and saved ourselves. It wouldn't have solved the problem, but we would have gotten to the solution in a matter of minutes or hour at most, because we didn't know we had a hard drive failure. So those that are using MSPs and think they're monitoring, be really cautious and find ways to check their monitoring, because we also found that same MSP had automated patching, and that wasn't working for 6 months either. So check the checker, I guess, is all I can say, because when it comes back down to it, it was still my neck on the line when these things didn't work. People at Swiss Tech at my company were mad at me, not the MSP. So they're supposed to be a partner and they weren't. So
Now, Mark, you got my invoice for 2 cents, but I am going to ask you, is it now documented?
no, because I would have to document and have somebody at a company who could follow the documentation. So no.
You have,
And by the way, you are the only invoice I've ever sent out for 2 pennies, but.
Sorry, a lot of information was breaking up there. I apologize, but I'm pretty sure I was being chastised.
No, I was just wondering if you have, I guess my question originally was around like manual answering of phones, right? So you said your inbound wasn't working. I mean, are there ways that you can put into place now where you can work with your phone company to say if the phone doesn't come in, you can route that to a cell phone?
I am investigating that piece. I've been told I can do it, and yes, that's on my to-do list. They claim they have a web portal that I can go to and enter a call forwarding number to. So yes, that's on the to-do list as the generic workaround that would get us, incoming calls working. And for a smaller organization like ourselves, I think that would certainly buy us a lot of time. For a company with 100 employees who might have 10 or 20 active phone lines at any given moment, that might not be enough, but for us, that certainly would be. So that is on my to-do list. If I could ever get out of this meeting, I might actually work on it today. But otherwise, later this week, that is on my list to do.
Don't let me hold you up.
But no, good point.
So, we use a company named Jive for our voice over IP, and it has simul ring, so our cell phones ring the same as the office phones.
And we have the ability to change the call plan like on the fly. So if we needed to reroute everything to a cell phone or multiple cell phones, you just go in and flip that and it'll take care of it too for you. It's been pretty responsive. We've liked it a lot.
Not like we ever did it when we had Comcast, but maybe we did.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into the Spectrum piece and see what they can do. So I appreciate the other ideas.
So Jason, do you finally get to take a break now that you've caught all these people up after March?
Sure.
You can go on vacation. Not to anywhere, but you can go on vacation.
I could do that.
Any other feedback or questions? Well, we got Jason on the line here.
I was just gonna say, I did hear a story yesterday from our wind damage that someone forgot that, like, I think it's probably part of the disaster recovery, is that you need to make sure you have gas in the generators that's gonna power your stuff. And if that's not being tested, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
So there was some good things coming out of these last 2 days.
I mean,
It was not ag litter, I should say. It was not us.
A couple of
you definitely don't want to be in the middle of a disaster and realize that you're panicking and you don't have the diesel fuel for your generator.
Yes. Because as we do right now, your gas stations also cannot work when there are no power.
Right.
So suddenly there was one gas station available in many, many miles. So.
Hey, Jason.
We had a customer, in the community. Power Solutions International is an Epicor user here in Chicago that does those gas and backup generators. They did a great presentation.
So Jason,
Also,
Jason, are you a homeowner?
Most days.
During a power outage, what should I do when my sump pump starts going crazy?
Well, it's interesting. I don't have a sump pump right now, but
Okay.
when I was living in Missouri, I had a basement with a sump pump, and I bought a battery backup, like an APC battery backup, and I plugged it in. I put it about 6 feet off the ground, and I powered my sump pump from that. Just in case the power would go out, I would at least be able to get water out of my basement if I needed to.
And we went with moisture sensors on our Wi-Fi that let you know when your sump pump isn't working, because it's nothing where you go look every day, ooh, did it work or am I flooded, and don't even know it. So
It's
there are
actually,
companies that have Wi-Fi moisture sensors that will monitor and let you know when it stops working.
it's funny that you bring that up, Calvin, because I know that we used to do a testing of our sump pump at least once or twice a month, where I just dump a bucket of water in it and just make sure that it actually pumped the water out. So that's, I mean, I know it's not necessarily business related, but it's something that, if you have sump pump or something like that you can test, you need to test those things. The
But
smallest
no,
thing.
Jason, to the term, if you don't test it,
Yep.
when you need to know that it's not working, it's too late.
Right, and it could be the smallest thing. I mean, a sump pump is a small thing, but man, if your basement gets flooded, the rest of your equipment's going to be a disaster.
There's a cool product called Pump Spy, and it will actually is an outlet you put over your outlet. Plug your sump pump into that, and it will monitor when your sump pump runs, and that's all fed via Wi-Fi. So if it loses Wi-Fi signal, you'll get an alert, you'll get a text message, plus there's an app for your phone you can look at and go, did my sump pump actually run? Because my sump pump's in a crawl space, and I have to basically clean out a closet to be able to go down and test that thing. So I like this where I go, okay, it hasn't run today, there's going to be a problem.
Yeah. So about just to sidetrack you, but it was a genuine question because I just purchased my first home and I have all these questions and seeing the storm coming through. It's like, what do people do when the power goes out and you have rain and everything?
Yep, that's exactly what I was fearful of as well, because I've had several friends that had that problem. Power went out, sump pump didn't work, basement got flooded, thousands of dollars worth of damage. A $500 APC UPS system will solve that problem.
You can also look at Home Depot for some of those systems, because the pumps take a lot more current draw than a server or computer. So you want to go big on the APC. I think some of the ones they sell through Home Depots are running off of a car battery, actually, more car battery size, and they'll have a trickle charger on it, but to give you more amp hours because that pump takes a lot of power.
Sure does.
Chris Weininger says you can also get temperature sensors for your server room. And Team Mazak, a good generator is worth it for any homeowner out there.
Thank you. That answers my question. I knew this would be a good topic. So.
All right, any other questions for Jason before we turn it over to Calvin? We're coming up on his 1 o'clock. All right.
Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
See you there in person.
Awesome, thanks.